The air inside the auction house felt heavy with the scent of hay, sweat, and something stale, like cardboard soaked by too many rains. Carter Hayes leaned against the back wall, arms crossed, trying to ignore the oppressive heat from the buzzing overhead lights. He hadn't planned to be here. It had been weeks since he'd last stepped into town, but when he spotted a flyer about a livestock auction, he figured it wouldn't hurt to swing by. His barn was always in need of repairs. New fence posts, a spare generator. Few odd jobs never hurt. What he didn't expect was the sight of the dog. A German shepherd lying flat in the center of the concrete ring, his ribs visible through patchy fur. The dog didn't flinch as the auctioneer's gavel echoed through the room. His body was covered in scars, a map of past abuse. The shepherd's eyes, distant and lifeless, barely registered anyone in the room. Carter froze, feeling something deep inside twist. He recognized that look. It wasn't just on dogs. It was something he'd seen before on soldiers, on men who'd seen too much and fought too hard, only to be forgotten. The auctioneer's voice rang out. Lot 47, military dog. 5 years old. No training record. Current bid stands at nothing. Laughter bubbled from the crowd, mixed with murmurs of judgment. That dog's half dead, one man joked. Carter felt a surge of anger, but he kept it in check. He wasn't here to fight. Then, without thinking, his voice cut through the crowd. I'll take him. The auctioneer glanced toward him, then shrugged, expecting a low bid. $50. The crowd chuckled. Carter's boots scraped against the floor, and he repeated firmly. 20. 20. The auctioneer eyed him skeptically, but Carter stood his ground. His tone wasn't a question, it was a demand. Sold, the auctioneer finally said. Carter moved forward, no longer caring about the murmurs from the crowd. His focus was on the dog lying lifeless in the ring, a symbol of all the pain he carried himself. He knelt beside the dog, speaking softly. It's okay now, buddy. We're going home. Carter didn't know what he expected from the dog. Hope, perhaps. Instead, Ranger remained still, eyes vacant, unwilling to trust. But as Carter signed the adoption papers, he knew that was just the beginning. This wasn't just about rescuing a dog. It was about finding redemption, healing the wounds that both of them carried. Little did Carter know, their journey together was about to transform them both in ways they never imagined. Welcome to Acts of Kindness Stories. Stay with us because this is just the beginning of an incredible journey filled with heart, hope, and healing. The journey of healing for Ranger and Carter was not immediate. It took time, patience, and trust, one step at a time. When Carter drove the dog back to his ranch, the silence between them felt heavier than the road dust swirling around his truck. Ranger lay curled up in the back of the truck, his body tense, but not yet trusting Carter completely. Every bump in the road made the shepherd flinch, as though expecting a blow that would never come. Carter kept his focus on the road ahead, keeping the vehicle steady and the space between them unhurried, just like the way he knew he needed to let the dog adjust to this new life. When they reached the ranch, Carter opened the truck door, letting the cool Montana air sweep inside. Ranger didn't move. Carter crouched beside the truck, his voice calm and steady. This is home now, buddy. No cages, no chains. Just you, me, and 200 acres of peace. Still, the shepherd didn't budge. Carter didn't try to force the dog out. Instead, he simply sat down on the gravel, his back resting against the truck's wheel well. He knew better than to rush it. He had spent years in the military, fighting battles he couldn't always win, and when he came back, he couldn't find the quiet he thought he wanted. Silence, he had learned, was often louder than gunfire. Carter wasn't going to force this dog into something he wasn't ready for. He looked at Ranger. I wasn't supposed to be here either, Carter murmured. I thought I could handle the quiet out here. But turns out, quiet's a hell of a lot louder than I thought. He paused. I lost a few good men, Ranger. I didn't know how to come back from that. I thought I could stay out here long enough for it to go away, but it didn't. The faces don't leave. Ranger's ears twitched at the sound of Carter's voice. It wasn't much of a response, but Carter could see it. Just a flicker of something deep inside the dog. Maybe it wasn't trust, but it was something. Carter didn't push. He simply sat there waiting. "You know," he said quietly after a while, "I wasn't sure about this place. I wasn't sure if I was ready for this either, but here we are." Ranger's tail twitched just once, barely noticeable, but Carter saw it. That little movement was enough for him. He stood up, keeping his movements slow, giving Ranger all the time he needed. No sudden moves, no rushing. "All right, buddy," Carter said, standing up, his tone gentle. "I'm not going to drag you. We'll take this one step at a time." As they walked together into the ranch, Carter could see the dog's nerves. Every corner of the cabin was a potential threat. His body stayed low to the ground, muscles tense, watching everything. Carter understood that. He had lived in that kind of constant alertness for years. But the night was the hardest for Ranger. Carter set up a simple bed for the dog in the cabin. He didn't expect Ranger to rest. The dog paced the length of the room, his claws clicking against the wooden floor. Every noise seemed to startle him. The creaks of the old house, the occasional howl of a distant coyote. Ranger didn't lie down. He didn't drink, didn't eat. He simply walked in circles, staying close to the door, as though waiting for something terrible to happen. Carter could feel his own restlessness. He had spent so much time fighting, so much time surviving, that sleep didn't come easily to him either. But there was no need for words between them. They both understood the weight of silence. He sat on the floor, leaning against the couch, his old copy of Lonesome Dove open in his lap, but his eyes never strayed too far from the dog. "You can have the couch if you want," Carter said quietly, his voice a soft offer. "Hell, you can have the whole damn place. I'm just the guy who pays the taxes." But Ranger didn't respond. He simply stayed by the door, eyes flicking nervously to Carter every now and then. Carter didn't push him. He knew the dog wasn't ready to accept comfort, just as he himself wasn't ready to accept peace. For both of them it would take time. Morning came slowly, but neither of them had slept. The house was still, and Carter could feel the tension in the air. Ranger didn't move much, still huddled by the door, but Carter noticed the dog was starting to follow him through the ranch. Not too close, always keeping a safe distance, but following. That was enough for Carter. In his own way, Ranger was starting to trust. The rainstorm was what finally broke the tension. It started late one night, the storm hammering against the tin roof like incoming artillery. Ranger had always been afraid of storms, and this time was no different. The dog was in full panic mode, trembling in the corner of the cabin, eyes wide and unfocused. Carter knew exactly what that was like. He had seen it before in his fellow soldiers, people who had experienced too much, who had been broken in ways that no one could understand. "Hey!" Carter called softly from the couch, sliding down onto the floor. "Easy, buddy. It's just rain." But Ranger didn't respond. He was too far gone into his panic to hear. Carter didn't move closer. He didn't try to touch the dog. Instead, he grabbed a blanket from the couch, draped it over his legs, and sat down on the floor, keeping his distance. "I used to hate the rain too," Carter said, his voice steady. "Sounds too much like rotors coming in hot, like the sound of a battle you don't know how to fight. The first time I heard it after I came home, I nearly tore the walls down looking for cover." Carter let out a soft laugh, though there was no humor in it. "Took me a while to figure it out, but rain's just rain. It doesn't mean anyone's coming." It wasn't much, but it was enough. Slowly, Ranger's trembling began to ease. His muscles still coiled tight, but he wasn't in full panic mode anymore. "Hell of a pair we make," Carter muttered under his breath. "One of us is going to have to figure out how to sleep through a storm." The minutes passed in silence, and then something shifted. Ranger crept forward, cautiously at first, as if every inch was a minefield. He stopped just shy of Carter's feet, lying down, not close enough to touch him, but close enough that Carter could feel the heat of his body. Carter didn't acknowledge it. He didn't reach out, didn't speak. He simply closed his eyes, letting the moment stretch as long as it would. And when he woke in the morning, stiff from the floor, he felt a warm weight against his leg. Ranger had settled in next to him, his head resting against Carter's shin. It wasn't trust, not yet, but it was something close. Outside, the sun had barely risen, casting the ranch in the soft light of early morning. Carter slowly moved, careful not to disturb the dog. Ranger didn't flinch. He stayed still, eyes closed, his breathing even and calm. The bond was starting to form. Slowly, quietly, Ranger was beginning to trust Carter. And Carter, he was starting to trust Ranger. By the third day they had developed a rhythm. Carter didn't push the dog. He simply went about his work on the ranch, talking to Ranger like he would to any other dog. Stories of the ranch, memories of his time in the military, funny moments from his past. Ranger didn't react, not at first. But Carter kept talking, filling the silence between them with words. It was during an afternoon on the porch, sitting together, that Carter asked, "You ever get tired of just surviving, buddy?" His voice was softer now, a bit more reflective. "The war ends, but you don't get to go home. You just keep surviving." Ranger didn't answer, but his ears flicked at the sound of his name, and for the first time, Carter saw something in the dog's eyes, a flicker of understanding. For Carter, and for Ranger, healing didn't come overnight. It didn't come in any easy form, but they were starting to find it, step by step, moment by moment. Ranger might not have been fully healed yet, but there was something in that soft thump of his tail. It was a beginning, and sometimes that was all you needed. As the days went on, Carter and Ranger found a rhythm. The ranch became more than just a place for them to exist. It became a home, a sanctuary. The once broken shepherd, now walking with more confidence, began to embrace his new life. He'd started to patrol the land, standing guard at the boundaries, his steps no longer hesitant. The dog who had once been a shell of himself, haunted by scars and trauma, was finding his strength. Carter noticed the small shifts, Ranger's tail wagging when he saw Carter at the gate in the mornings, his eyes no longer constantly scanning for danger, but softening with each passing day. The ranch had become their shared haven, a place of quiet growth, where both of them were learning to heal. One day, as the sun set over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and gold, Carter looked over at Ranger. The dog was sitting beside him, his head resting against Carter's leg. It was a quiet moment, but it spoke volumes. They had both fought battles, both had been broken in different ways, but they were no longer alone. They had each other, and that, Carter realized, was enough. Ranger had found his peace. And Carter, who had come to the ranch hoping to find solace, had discovered something even more powerful. Hope, in the form of a dog who had been given a second chance. As Carter watched the stars begin to twinkle above the ranch, he knew this journey wasn't over. There were more dogs out there, more people who needed to understand the importance of healing, of giving second chances. And with Ranger by his side, he was ready to keep fighting that fight. Together, they would make sure that no one was left behind, whether they had 4 legs or 2. Acts of Kindness Stories has always been about moments like this, where love, patience, and compassion change lives. If this story touched you, please like, share, and comment below to help us reach even more people who believe in second chances. And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe to our channel to help us hit 10,000 subscribers. Every story matters, and with your support, we can continue to share more stories that inspire change and kindness. Thank you for being part of our community. Together we can make the world a little bit better, one act of kindness at a time.